Hello and welcome to the RPG Blender, where we give lesser played games and forgotten settings the roll of the dice they deserve. I'm your host, Game Master George, and today we're going to be continuing our look at running horror games. We're going to be looking at some of the problems that are associated with them, some of the difficulties that you're going to be having as a game master trying to run one of these games. We're going to talk about how to solve it, and then I'm going to present a quick review of a game that I think covers this topic very well, either with some of its mechanics, or its theme, or the way that it presents itself. If you've missed any of the past topics, go ahead and check the description for links to all past and future videos in this series. Before we dive into this, please subscribe and click that notification bell to be made aware when the next parts go live. And if you'd like to see these tips put into action, go ahead and check out our Twitch page. We'll be going live with some tabletop action in the near future, so give it a follow so you can join in when the fun begins. So without any more delay, let's dive right into running a horror game, preserving the mystery. So this is one that probably all of you have struggled with using published monsters in your own games outside of the horror genre, and that's players who already know what they're coming across. It doesn't matter how new the characters are to dragons, every player has an idea of what a dragon is, what a dragon does, and it's very hard for a player to separate themselves from that. Now that's a problem that we as a game master would term as metagaming, but in a horror game, the problem is slightly different. Normally, you'd be worrying about your players knowing the weaknesses and being able to give themselves an unfair advantage that draws all the players out of the game by knowing the mechanical ins and outs of what they're fighting. In a horror game, the problem is slightly different. Yes, you can still have the issue of them knowing what mechanics they're going to come across, but with a horror game, part of the horror comes from mystery. Look at any horror movie, any horror game that you've ever seen or taken part in. One of the biggest elements there is the unknown about the creature that they're up against. If you walk into a horror movie and know straight up, this is what the monster is, this is what he does, this is what he looks like, you'll experience less of an impact when those items come up throughout the course of the movie or game. Now, the problem with running a horror game is that so many of these common and frankly iconic monsters are already well known to your players, so it's very hard to give your players a werewolf hunt and have them be surprised by anything. And with that lack of surprise comes a little bit less fear. And this is unfortunately a problem without an easy answer. There's no way that you can go buy a book or a module and know that you're going to be able to get this air of mystery from it. Because there's always a chance that your players have read that module, have seen that monster before, have read the material that this adventure is cribbing off of, or even the legend that that original book was referencing. It's very hard for you to get a drag and drop solution for this problem. But that's not to say it's without hope. So, you want to run a werewolf game. What can you do in order to bring that mystery back into your game? Well, for starters, grab a sheet of paper and make a list of all of the different traits of a werewolf. Going with this, we have a human form which transforms into a bestial form. We have a full moon transformation, a weakness to silver or wolfsbane, an infectious bite which can convey the curse to another creature, an uncontrollable primal hunger for living flesh, and the creature hidden in plain sight, hunting in the dark while maintaining his human form during the day. So what we have here is we have bones of a monster. So what we need to try to do is twist these bones enough that your players won't immediately recognize it. Or if they do recognize it, will misappropriate it to a normal werewolf and not catch the little twists that you've thrown in. Instead of being a physical transformation, maybe their soul leaves their body, becoming a spirit beast which then goes out and hunts. Your players then hunt down the werewolf, thinking they know what's going on, go to strike, only to see it dissipate and reappear in another form or another place. Your players are now surprised by what's happening, thrown off guard, and brought closer to that horrific experience. Or perhaps we'll tackle the curse. Normally the werewolf changes during the full moon, but perhaps instead the transformation into their spirit creature is triggered by the sound of thunder at midnight. Anytime that a thunderbolt crashes at the hour of 12, their transformation is triggered. This becomes something less predictable, something where your players can see, oh, we're after a werewolf, of course, that's what this seems to be. We'll wait for the full moon, and then we'll strike when this creature arises. But on the clear night of that full moon, they watch, and nothing. No attacks. Then a couple nights later, as the moon has shrunk, the attack begins again in the middle of a thunderstorm. Something new, something unexpected to drive your players again. As you see, you don't need to do away with the tropes of the werewolf game. You can maintain the bones of a werewolf hunt, hunting down this person who is a wolf in sheep's clothing, while separating it enough from what's normal in the werewolf game for your players to be caught off guard, to have that moment of surprise before they're driven into their flight or fight reactions. It can be a hard thing to pull off, but the steps are fairly simple to be able to create something that is reminiscent of these classic iconic moments while still having your own unique flair, which is going to surprise your players. Now, what do I think is a good game to capture this? This answer is, again, pretty obvious, and that is the Gumshoe system Night's Black Agents. If you're not familiar with this, the Gumshoe system is an investigation game. They have a unique mechanic where if you are utilizing your investigation ability, you do not need to roll any dice. You simply need to apply an appropriate investigation skill at the right time, and you get the information. This is great because it takes out that linchpin in your adventures where your players need to succeed in that single roll, otherwise the investigation falls flat. Here, they just need to have the appropriate skill, and they're going to get the information. So you can run your investigation game without worrying that your players aren't going to find enough clues to actually make it to the end. Now, of course, they can get more information if they not only use the correct skill, but also spend some of their precious few investigation points. This can allow them to get that greater depth of information so that you can have them have their varying degrees of success without relying on the randomness of a dice roll. Now, Night's Black Agents is a game which is based on this system for telling modern-day vampire stories. Your characters will all be ex-secret agents from some governmental organization. They're then brought into this world of a vast vampiric conspiracy, infiltrating all the various levels of government. So far, so standard. Sounds probably a lot like a game of Vampire the Masquerade, but told from the humans side of things. But where this system shines with this element is with its creation of the vampires themselves. You see, the vampires in your story are not necessarily the normal blood-sucking kind. Instead, this system gives you a few different flavors of vampires, which you can then tailor with specific abilities in order to create your own unique vampires with abilities unknown to your players. So you could create the standard Dracula-type creature, going around at night, turning into a bat and drinking people's blood. Or your vampires could be an underwater race, feeding off of the emotions of creatures as they near the water's edge. In my own game, mine were spacefaring worm-like creatures, which would then be implanted in someone's ear, cause them to develop a hunger for brains. Mixing together the Ceti Alpha 5 worm from Star Trek and zombies in order to get something akin to the Mind Flayers from Dungeons & Dragons, but in a modern spy thriller game. Now, the mystery doesn't stop there. Because this is an investigation game, it's also about finding where the vampires have infiltrated society. And this game has another very unique way of building out that infiltration. They have what is called the conspiramid. This is akin to the corkboard you see in many of these types of movies, where you have the various pictures with the yarn stretching between them, building out the various links. Instead, what you do is you have a pyramid of boxes. You fill out the various boxes with nodes within the vampiric conspiracy. The ones higher up are the ones that are more powerful, more well-connected, and harder for them to get to. Whereas all the way down at the bottom, they might have the individual members, the weak links within the network, which can then tie, by following the steps up the pyramid, back to the heart of the conspiracy. And the way that you're building this out is creating yet another bit of mystery for your players to have to interact with. Let's say that they've been working with Interpol in order to investigate the conspiracy, only to find out in one adventure, as they track down one of the lower nodes on the pyramid, that the director of Interpol is indeed a vampire. Now your players, everything that they do, everything that they know, is already in the hands of the vampires. They question what they've been doing. They question if they've actually been doing the right things. How much of what they've done has been guided by this vampiric figurehead. And the horror begins to sink in. As you can see, you can use these elements within this game in order to build something unique, but still reminiscent of an iconic vampire story. And that's what you need to do in your game, no matter what system you're running. Take the elements of the iconic story you want to run, and then just put a little twist on it to make it something unique and something that will surprise your players to drive them closer to the horror. Thank you so much for taking the time to enjoy this video. If this helped you, please like, comment, subscribe, but most important, keep watching. We've got our other videos on the topic of running horror games, and if you're interested, we have our own actual play series where you can see some of these elements at play. If the game of Night's Black Agents interests you, you can check out our actual play here. Meanwhile, please come back to check out the rest of this series. Anyway, thank you again, and remember, there's gaming outside the Forgotten Realms.